Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of What's Up, Cuz? I am your host, Jason Palmer, and I'm usually joined by my real life cousin, Lance Say Irvin. However, Lance is not able to make it this evening. He has some personal business that he is tending to. However, the show must go on because we got a lot to talk about right now in the world of sports. And we are doing a special edition tonight of What's Up, Cuz, to talk specifically about the decision, part two. And I'm not talking about LeBron James and where he's taking his talents. We're now talking about Coach Primetime, Deion Sanders, and his decision to leave Jackson State University to take the head coaching job at the University of Colorado. This topic has caused a lot of interesting conversations on social media. A lot of family and friends are very passionate about this topic. Anyone who's ever attended an HBCU understands just how important these institutions are to our community, for one. And the people who go there are very passionate about their university. So there's been a lot of criticism of the alumni at Jackson State. There's been a lot of criticism of the administration at Jackson State for letting Deion go. But the fact of the matter is, this is just something that happens in college sports. We see this all the time. So I'm a little concerned on why people are kind of going off the deep end on this. I understand the topic, and we're all very passionate about it. However, this happens in college sports. If you trust a college head coach when they're recruiting your child to say, I'm going to be here 4 years, I guess you trust the Army recruiter too when they tell you they ain't going to put you on the front lines when you join the military. And you say, hey, I signed up to be a computer technician in the Army. And they say, get up there on that 50 millimeter gun up there. This is just what happens in college sports. So, HBCUs are not going to be any different in that regard. So, unfortunately, my cousin Lance was tied up because, he's worked at a number of institutions, PWIs and HBCUs, and he really wanted to be here tonight, but he's got something that he could not get out of. And, this is just a hot topic, and we did not feel as a show this was something that we could hold on to. So, we'll just, we'll discuss this topic. And I've got two incredible guests to come on the show. We always bring you some of the hottest guests that we can when we're looking for a topic. And it just so happened for me, as I was researching this story so I can do an article on it for my website, jcordenreports.com, I went to BET.com and read an unbelievable article. The title of it is The HBCU Endowment Gap, Why Black Colleges Lag So Far Behind PWIs. And the article was written by my fellow independent journalist, Denise Clay Murray, who's based out of the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. And so I reached out to her this afternoon just on a whim, and lo and behold, she was available to join us on the show tonight. But her article, which was written just 2 months ago, like around October the 7th of 2022, really brings up a lot of things that I don't think people are considering as we discuss this topic. So I wanted to bring her on the show tonight. But before I bring her on, once again, welcome to What's Up, Cuz. If you're joining us for the first time, we appreciate that. If you're watching us on the Sports Zone Chicago YouTube live channel, go ahead and like and subscribe to that channel. It will give you access to all the shows we have here on the Sports Zone Chicago network. If you're tuning in on the Facebook live feed, we appreciate you tuning in there. Go ahead and send your comments and questions through there. We'll try to interact you into the show that we're doing here tonight. And if you're watching us on the Sports Zone Chicago app, we appreciate you tuning in on the app on your phone or wherever you have the app. And for those of you who are tuning in worldwide via our ROKU channel, we appreciate you tuning in there. The Sports Zone Chicago Roku channel. Go on your Roku and download our channel right there. Download that app right there on your Roku. Put it on all your TVs. That way you can get access to our shows. And we appreciate you tuning in wherever you are in the world. Our guy Armando, he's already chiming in. He's YouTubing. And I know Armando's got some comments. I see Vernon is already in the room. And Vernon has got some comments already. He's saying JSU couldn't afford to keep him. Yesterday's prime is not today's price. That's probably very accurate, Vernon, but we're going to get into that. But there's a lot more depth to this story. And our second guest coming up at 6:30 will be our good friend Jamar Harp. He's currently a coach down at Grambling State University, so he can tell us firsthand what it's like coaching down at a HBCU. But hey, let's get ready to bring on our first guest. As I said before, she's an independent journalist based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Welcome to the show, Denise Clay Murray. Denise, how you doing? Welcome to What's Up, Cuz.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Oh man, thank you so much for joining us. So Denise, your article that you wrote 2 months ago, I take it you had no idea everything was going to happen that's happened over the last 48 hours when you wrote this.
Well, here's the thing. I actually did. And the reason why I did is my husband is a sports writer. And he's also a professor at an HBCU. So we kind of watched with some interest when Deion Sanders took this job in the first place. And, when you were talking in your introduction about parents thinking that, when a coach comes into their house and talks to them about recruiting their kid, that they're going to be there for the whole time and stuff, and how you shouldn't buy that. One thing that my husband pointed out is that you shouldn't necessarily have bought into the fact that Deion Sanders was going to stay at Jackson State even longer than as long as he did. In fact, I thought he'd have been gone after a year. I thought that after the first SWAC championship, he'd have tried to, turn that into something else. Because let's face it, if you remember Deion Sanders as a player in the NFL or even in his college days, this was not the guy that you go to when you're trying to start a revolution. This is not the guy that you say, hey, let's take up arms and fight, to improve stuff in the community. He's not that guy. Mm-hmm. He's the guy that, as I said to someone earlier today, trying to do something for the collective good doesn't necessarily get you access to private jets or floor-length mink coats. You need money for that. And if you're going to, and if you're looking to increase your payday, which, let's face it, and this is something else that people need to understand, just because a pro player has made like $40 million a year or something, doesn't mean that by the time he gets to Deion Sanders' age, he has any or even most of that money. For every Magic Johnson, there's that group of guys that were in the ESPN 30 for 30 called Broke. For every Magic Johnson, there's a whole bunch of those guys. And we don't know, even though Deion Sanders did do a couple of reality shows that kind of made you think he was in the second category, the fact that he left Jackson State as quickly as he did probably confirms that, yes, he was in the category of dudes that was probably going to be on the next set of Broke, the 30-30 from ESPN. So, like I said, money plays a big part. But while Jackson State was able to give the initial money to get him to come there in the first place, for him to stay there would have required much longer money probably. And what I found out from doing my story for BET.com is that a lot of historically Black colleges, for a variety of reasons, do not have that kind of money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want you to talk about with me a little bit more, Denise. For those of you who have not read her article, please go on BET.com and check it out. We will provide a link to the article in just a few, but it's about the HBCU endowment gap and why Black colleges lag so far behind their counterparts in PWIs. And as you were researching this story and then getting it out there on BET, what stood out to you the most when you found out just how big the disparity gap is between PWIs and HBCUs?
Well, you kind of know that the disparity is big just based on the institutions themselves. Mm-hmm. What we have to remember about HBCUs is why they were created in the first place. Mm-hmm. They were created as a means of providing somewhat of a postgraduate education to people that you didn't want to necessarily admit into PWIs.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you had you had HBCUs in Texas to keep Black folks from wanting to go to the University of Texas. It was as simple as that. But just because you have those institutions and they're supposed to provide this separate yet equal education doesn't necessarily mean that you're funding them the same. And
Mm-hmm.
part of why endowments for HBCUs are so grotesquely much lower than they are for PWIs is that disparity of funding. The university, the Maryland, I speak for a living, I just don't always do it well. A group of colleges, a group of HBCUs in Maryland, Morgan State, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Bowie, where my husband teaches, where you have a bunch of these schools that recently just won a settlement from the state of Maryland for grotesque underfunding. And now they're able to put some of that money towards stuff that they wanted to do for the schools. But that still doesn't really help you with endowment because endowment is kind of your rainy day fund. And you have to be able to raise that. And if you're already trying to do stuff like make sure that you have potable drinking water for your students, like at Jackson State,
Mm-hmm.
or if you're trying to make sure that your dorms no longer have issues like at places like Howard, where you had students protesting the conditions of the dorms last year. If you're trying to do all of that, trying to set aside a rainy day fund is much harder for you, which is why there are no HBCUs. And this was one of the more interesting things I found out when I was doing my reporting.
Mm-hmm.
You have like Princeton University. No, I'm sorry, it was Harvard University. Has
Mm-hmm.
$10 billion endowment. That's billion with a B.
Say that again, Denise. How much?
$10 billion. That's billion with a B, which
Mm-hmm.
means if Harvard decided tomorrow that they wanted to provide 200 all expense paid scholarships to kids in the poorest section of Massachusetts that had really good grades and scores and stuff. They could do that and they wouldn't even go down to $9 billion.
Right.
That's how much that is. On the other hand, the HBCU with the highest endowment as of 2021, in one of the reports I read to do this story,
Mm-hmm.
is Howard University. And they have $795,203,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds like a lot, but when you compare it to the 10 billion
Mm-hmm.
that Harvard has, you get like a ratio of every $100 that a PWI has an endowment, HBCUs have a buck. And that $99 is a lot of money when you're talking about things like facilities and programming and even hiring a football coach. Because
Yes.
in a lot of states, the highest paid person, the highest paid state employee in the entire state, like for example, in Alabama, the highest paid state employee is Nick Saban, the
Yes.
coach of the University of Alabama.
And the highest paid employee in the state of Illinois is the head coach of the University of Illinois football program.
That's the highest paid state employee. And when you're an HBCU and you don't even have, a $1 billion endowment to play with, you can't necessarily go out and hire $1 million a year football coach because that's books and financial aid for you.
Right, right. And so, Denise, let me ask you this to stay on this topic of the endowments, and it's just an astronomical difference between HBCUs and PWIs. You brought up the lawsuit that the HBCUs in Maryland did, and they won. Alabama State has also recently filed a lawsuit. Here in Illinois, Chicago State University, which is a state university, their endowment fund right now sits at $5 million. And Chicago State has got a bunch of problems going on over there as well, but they're also a state university. One of the things we're seeing is that many of these HBCUs, we're not talking about the private ones like Spelman or Morehouse, but the ones who are state universities have historically been getting, without a proper term, screwed over by the states and not getting their money. So these lawsuits are being filed. During your research, can you tell me about any other state HBCUs that are also kind of going down this path, and has it been successful for them in getting some of the resources that are owed to them?
Actually, there's one I was covering before I even wrote this story for BET, and it's Cheney State University in Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia. Cheney has been struggling to recover money from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in terms of funding for decades. In fact, there was talk about having one of the other state universities absorb Cheney to put it together with Westchester University as a means of trying to save money. And if it were not for the alumni at Cheney, which includes a very powerful Philadelphia lawyer named Michael Cord, who was not going to let this go, Cheney would have become part of Westchester. But now they're suing to get the millions of dollars that they're owed. And again, this goes back to why HBCUs were created in the first place. They weren't necessarily created to compete with the PWIs. They were created to have a place for Black people to go to school, that since they weren't going to allow them to go to the PWIs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why right now, and I found this out after I did my story, but I think it's interesting that speaks to this point. North Carolina A&T, which is a really good engineering school, HBCU. Right now, they just got $2 million taken out of their budget because out-of-state students said, "Hey, we like the idea of going to an historically Black college to study engineering, where I'm not necessarily having to deal with racism while I'm trying to deal with theoretical calculus." And because they went over their enrollment, or what the state set aside as an enrollment for out-of-state students, they're fining them $2 million. And then you also have the situation at Tennessee State, where because they've gotten more people to come and enroll there, you have the state legislature, who is also being sued for underfunding, asking why so many people are all of a sudden wanting to go to Tennessee State.
Mm-hmm.
So, the endowments are one thing, but this is just kind of a tip of an iceberg when it comes to HBCUs, and the fact that when the George Floyd shooting happened and other things that related to how people of color navigate race, when they're trying to get an education or do just about anything else, when you started to see Black kids make the conscious decision to go to HBCUs instead of predominantly white colleges, all of a sudden the fact that these places are being underfunded and that they wanted their money became an issue. And it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out, and what, if anything, if these folks start actually getting the money that they're owed, so that way they can do some things, like new facilities and different things.
Well, Denise, one of the things that I learned, first of all, let me say this: the Deion Sanders thing, because he brought such a national spotlight to Jackson State, he was able to highlight Jackson State. But you know, and I know, being members of the media, once that media spotlight is on you, it also shows your blemishes and your flaws, in addition to all the good things that you have done. And so with Jackson State, right now on social media, everyone seems to be going in on Jackson State's alumni, their alumni association, and people who graduated there. And the JSU president came out and said that 87% of the Jackson State alums are not giving back to the university, that only 13% of their alums are giving back. We also know that this is a problem, and I think we need to discuss this as well. Why are people in our community, why are we just taking from our institutions and not giving back to them? Is that something that your husband has experienced, where he's taught at, and something that you have some knowledge of? I know I've experienced it from the university that I attended, but I wanted to get your take on that as well.
Well, first of all, that's crazy low. That is like really, really low. Only 13% of the people. That's just ridiculously low. You have some schools that have put effort and money into getting the alumni to donate. Like Morgan State has a good alumni association, and I know this because we get mailers from them every day.
Mm-hmm.
And Howard also has a good development office that goes out and gets money from alums. Spelman does, Morehouse does. All of the bigger HBCUs that you hear about that are doing pretty well, like the FAMUs and like that, they all have like organizations within an institution that say we're going to go out and get money from alums. But even if I would think, because I went to Temple, and Temple asks me for money all the time. And sometimes I can give them money when I've had a particularly good month as a freelance journalist. Sometimes I have to remind them of what I got my degree in. And sometimes giving you that $1,000 you want just isn't going to happen. But when only 13% of your alumni are giving, that's an institutional problem. That's something that the institution needs to work on. And I'm sure that Jackson State has a development office, and maybe they need to put them to work on that problem. But, the alumni that are saying, hey, why didn't you have more money to give to Coach Prime and blah, blah, blah. Physician, heal thyself.
Yes.
If you want them to have more money to do this kind of stuff, I'm pretty sure that there are some alums from Jackson State that are playing in the pros, that have, gone on to do great things in the community and are making money. It's not like people are asking you to give that, Mackenzie Bezos bread. We're not asking you for that. But I give, $50 because every little bit helps. And
yes,
if you want to put it toward the athletic department, then you can earmark it to do that. But when only 13% of you are donating, I don't even want to think about what your endowment looks like. Because if only 13% of you are donating, then your endowment is probably in really bad shape. And that is something you might want to concern yourself with a little bit more than you do a new football coach. And I say that because in the end, the endowment is what you need to make sure that you have the facilities to keep students coming there and wanting to pay their tuition to be a part of the Jackson State experience. And if the money's not there to do that, then you're not going to have a football team or anything else after a while, because you're going to have to start making cuts. And while football is usually the last thing to be cut from any college budget, that doesn't mean it won't get cut.
Right. And so we have learned that Jackson State's endowment, according to a tracking service that follows HBCU endowments, they're currently sitting at about 60 million. And ironically, it got a jump just because Deion Sanders has been there the past 2 or 3 years. They've seen a jump. And since 2020, we do need to point out that many HBCUs did see a significant jump in contributions toward their endowments. You've already mentioned Howard. Spelman is doing pretty well. Hampton is doing pretty well. Now, not compared to PWIs, but among HBCUs, they are doing pretty well. Can you talk to me a little bit about the endowment figures? So, because one of the things I have is, okay, Howard has got 750 million in endowments, that we know. Right. Yet last November, we saw students at Howard going completely in on the administration because there was fungus and mold in the dorms. There was roach infestations. There was a rodent infestation. The buildings are crumbling in terms of the infrastructure at Howard. Anyone who's been to Howard knows it's not in the best of neighborhoods in DC, but okay.
Yeah, I was just there a couple of weeks ago for a conference, and the thing is, you can have an endowment, but it's what you do with it that counts.
Yes.
I mean, you can be sitting on $750 million, which is why when I was doing this story and I thought about that, I'm like, okay, you have $750 million. Why are you have kids talking about, I got mold in my room?
Yeah.
What are you doing with the money? Because, sure, it looks nice sitting there, but it's not helping. And, you're supposed to be helping.
I agree, Denise, and that's a question that I want to answer too. Because at 750 million, first of all, I can't understand, and because we're talking sports, how it should have the best athletic programs of all the HBCUs. Yet, when I look at their teams, they're kind of not good.
Well, it also depends on who you can get as participants in your sports.
Mm-hmm.
If and let's just keep it real, whether or not you go to an HBCU for an athletic program depends on what you want from your educational experience overall. If the goal is to make the pros, which there are approximately 4,500 people in the entire country that are paying professional sports of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
If the goal is to make the pros, you have to be in a program that is going to get you the kind of exposure that's going to get you to the pros. And you're not necessarily going to find that at an HBCU, even though the kids at Jackson State football probably came the closest to anybody over the last 2 years with Coach Prime, because not so much because of their own ability, but because Deion Sanders was there.
Mm-hmm.
So if your bottom line is I want to go and become a professional athlete, then sure, you go to a PWI. I went to Ohio State my first couple of years of college, and you come out of the dorm and there were ABC trucks there every single week because you knew they were going to broadcast, Ohio State and whoever they were playing is the game of the week. That was just the thing. But if you understand that you're probably not going to be one of the 4,500 people playing professional sports, and you want to make sure that you have some sort of a backup once you get out of college, then you probably go to a HBCU because there are people on that campus that are trying to make sure that you get out of college. Now, I'm not saying that it is impossible to become a professional athlete from an HBCU because, Jerry Rice, Walter Payton, there are more than a few guys that came out of HBCUs and became, like Hall of Famers in the NFL. But that is the exception. That is not necessarily the rule. But if you wanted to become the rule, you've got to work on it. And the thing is, people have to ask them, the alumni of these schools have to ask themselves if they want to work on that, because it has been made very obvious to those of us who observe this that if you're expecting folks to, who from the PWI world to make sure that you get the money to encourages you to compete with them, that's not going to happen. Because if all of a sudden because Jamel Hill wrote an article about this a while ago, and a few other people have written that if all of the Black kids decide to go to HBCUs and take,
we dominate every single sport, Denise.
They would dominate. HBCUs they'd have the ABC trucks
They
on
would
campus every week, for the game.
Yes.
But because there is so much money in college sports, I mean, I still remember when I was at Ohio State and I used to ask, well, why is it that we can't get new dorms, but the athletic department gets everything? It's because the athletic department budget is about, Philadelphia's budget, the city of Philadelphia's budget, all by itself. And everything that the athletic department makes goes to the athletic department. It doesn't go to the school it doesn't go to the entire school. Like when Chevrolet used to give away scholarships during college football games, and they say, oh, well, this goes into the general fund. That's the only thing that goes into the general fund. That's the only scholarships from sports that go into the general fund. Everything else goes to the athletic department. And folks have to ask themselves, do they want to have a more robust athletic department at the expense of a more robust academic program, or do they want to have a good academic program and have sports be secondary? Because the way that HBCUs are funded by the states that where they're located, and even with the private ones, you cannot necessarily have both. And if I'm a 5-star recruit and I've got the choice between going somewhere where I might end up in the pros, like a Penn State or an Ohio State or University of Maryland, and going to Howard or Bowie or even FAMU or any of those schools, I'm going to go with the one that's going to possibly have me playing on Sundays.
So here's the thing, and once again, being joined by journalist Denise Clay Murray for this conversation tonight. I completely supported Deion Sanders when he went there. I understood what he was trying to do. It's something I've talked about for the past 20 years. I do agree with Jamel Hill. I won't even say football, because I've always said that if we really want to do this and make the money to bring them back to our institutions, we need to take over basketball. One, it's less scholarships. Okay. You only need really 3 solid players, and you're probably going to be good enough to make the NCAA tournament where the money is, so that you can bring it back to your school, as opposed to football.
It certainly worked for Temple for years.
There you go. Well, I mean, Coach Chaney, great coach down there, at Temple. It could definitely work, but we have to be committed to it, and we have to understand that. I do agree with you that too often we said, well, we want to focus on the academics, and the athletics is something else that we do. I think we have to change that mindset in 2022, though, Denise, because I think the money that comes from the athletics is what's funding a lot of this stuff. And these administrators can do kind of what they want with the money once they get the board of trustees involved, but everyone has to have that kind of same philosophy. So, as I have a few more minutes with you, let me ask you this. In light of everything that's happening now, in light of the conversations that are now taking place, where do you see this issue going? Are we still going to be talking about this next week, or will we have all moved on to a different topic?
I think we probably will still be talking about it after this week, because there is and one of my favorite writers is a gentleman named Karan Phillips, who writes for Deadspin.
Yeah, I read that one.
And he has kind of been on this since the beginning. In fact, when it was announced that Deion Sanders was going to Colorado, he was the first person I thought of. And what we have to ask ourselves is, okay, if we want to bring in former players to come and coach our kids and stuff like that, what are we willing to give up in exchange for that? As my mom always used to tell me, no one can walk on your back if it's not bent. And what Jackson State pretty much did was bent over backward for one guy. And that doesn't make them bad people, because let's face it, all you were thinking about was you need a new football coach. This person wants to coach your team, wants to coach your kids, and wants to bring people in to to play for you. And you went undefeated, and got to the SWAC championship twice. Granted, the first time you lost real bad. But they play again on, I believe it's Saturday.
They played the 17th in the Celebration Bowl.
Yep. Right, the Celebration Bowl. So, you wanted all of that, but what did you give up to get it? And is this person, what did you actually gain from this? I'm sure you gain a little more in your endowment. You gain some other things, but you also have a room full of kids that the football coach who was leaving to go somewhere else told not to go into the transfer portal because they're not necessarily good enough to go where he's going. And the thing is, you may have ruined some of these kids for football based purely on that. So if you're going to do this, if you're going to, emphasize sports a little more, bring in people to, coach the kids in a way that gets them to the pros possibly, or if you're going to have more of an emphasis on sports, then you need to have the academic structure in place to, at least help these kids get a degree, because most of them are not going to be one of the lucky 4,500.
Mm-hmm.
And it would also help if you have somebody who is as committed to building a program that will last past their presence
Mm-hmm.
as you are making sure you get that year or two. Because right now, I'm not sure where Jackson State goes beyond this. When you have a person who who was so whose identity was so tied to the team, it's going to be interesting to see if the team can be untangled from that. And if not, and if so, who does that and how does that work?
Yeah, I agree. And we just put up the headline that's on the that's the headline in Jackson, Mississippi's main newspaper right now. Now that he's gone, now what happens? And don't get me wrong, he brought a new practice facility, he brought a new locker room. I think he brought hope during his time there. I think he was starting to change the culture, and he really went in on people and said, yeah, you coming down here for homecoming and party, and this has been my criticism of the alumni. Y'all coming down here to kick it, but then you won't come inside during the game to support the game, or you coming in at halftime because you want to see the bands, and then you leaving at halftime. You're not there to support the program fully. So I do think the culture at some of these HBCUs is also something that we need to talk about right now.
My husband said exactly that
Mm-hmm.
earlier today. Instead of just coming for the halftime show, come for the game. Instead of just coming for homecoming and for the parties, come to the game. Because, even though you're probably not going to get the best football you've ever seen, because I've been to a HBCU and place kickers. If y'all just got some decent place kickers, for the field goals and the extra points, that would help a lot. But the bottom line is, you're not going there, or at least you're not supposed to be going there to see a halftime show that just happens to have a football game surrounding it. It's supposed to be the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree.
And just to really anger my fellow band geeks, if the schools put as much effort as into the football team as they do the band,
Amen.
If they put that same kind of funding and care into the football team as they would the band, people might actually stay past halftime. I'm just saying.
I agree. I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that statement at all. And hey, Denise, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a pleasure meeting you and talking with
problem.
you.
Thank you.
And please, once again, tell everyone how they can follow you and your work.
Okay, well, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Denise the Writer. That's also where I am on Instagram and on TikTok. I usually cover politics, so I don't really get to do a whole lot of stuff about sports. But if you want to see like some really good sports writing, my husband has a show on WURD in Philadelphia called The Chris Murray Report on Saturdays, and it's on 11 to 1 Eastern Time, which means it's 10 to 12, Central Time.
Right.
So, because he's more the sports guy in our house. It's just that I happen to know this stuff.
It's all the same. It's politics and sports. It's all the same. You know how it is when you freelancing like we are. We just come on, whatever, go pay me my money, like Deion said.
Exactly.
Hey, Denise, thank you so much once again for joining us. I really do appreciate this. Just absolute great information. Continue to do what you do. And thank you to your husband as well for what he's doing. I really appreciate it. And you and I will stay in contact now that we know each other.
I would like that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Denise. All right. Coming up next, everyone, we are going to take a commercial break, and then we're coming back with our guy, Jamar Harp. And he's going to give you the angle from a person who's currently coaching at a HBCU down there in Louisiana at Grambling State. And I'm sure he's got a lot to say, especially after what he just heard from our guests, and just want to hear some of his personal experience. And Jamar, a long-time guest here on our show. So you're watching What's Up, Cuz. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in about 2 minutes.
No, I don't know though. I'm scared. I mean, you're so...
Do you know that you're in my lane? No, not at all. Are you not paying attention? Are you texting? I was just checking in with my mom. I was telling her that I thought we'd be home by 6. It's okay. There's enough time. Just pay attention. I'm not even halfway through my text. There's no way. I'm not even going to look up. My babies are in the car. You have to pay attention. It's just supposed to be a quick text. I'm so sorry.
Operator 901, where's the emergency?
127 Brynmere.
Okay, what's going on there?
I'd like to order a pizza for delivery.
Ma'am, you've reached 911. This is an emergency line.
Large with half pepperoni, half mushroom.
You know you've called 911. This is an emergency line.
Do you know how long it'll be?
Okay, ma'am, is everything okay over there? Do you have an emergency or not?
Yes.
And you're unable to talk because...
Right.
Is there someone in the room with you? Just say yes or no.
Yes.
Okay, it looks like I have an officer about a mile from your location. Are there any weapons in your house?
No.
Can you stay on the phone with me?
No. See you soon. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody, to What's Up, Cuz. I'm your host, Jason Palmer. My cousin, who's usually here with me, Lance Irvin, he had a personal commitment this evening that he could not get out of, and he's dying that he can't be here. He's actually texting me questions to ask our guests because he so wants to be here with Lance. Having coached at PWIs and HBCUs, he definitely has an interesting take on the subject, and we're going to talk about it again on next week's show. So this will not be the only time we talk about this topic, because I got the feeling this conversation is going to go on for a few weeks. This is what a story that we call in the media business that has legs. This one's going to go on for a while. And so we are talking about the decision by former Jackson State head coach Deion Sanders to leave Jackson State, and he has taken the new job at the University of Colorado. He is now a Colorado Buffalo, and he is in Boulder, Colorado. He will coach in the Celebration Bowl for Jackson State. So this is going to be very interesting with him going back to coach in a couple of weeks with everything that's happened, and it'll be interesting what the environment is by December the 17th. So our second guest tonight is a good friend of the show. He's got the record for most appearances here on What's Up, Cuz, because of his knowledge, and we just love having him. He also hosts his show, Sports 101, on Wednesdays here on Sports Zone Chicago, which will be coming back pretty soon. After taking a little bit of time off, and it's always a pleasure to have this guy on because of his knowledge, especially of HBCUs and athletics. And he's currently now at Grambling State University. He serves as a special team and defensive analyst. Let's bring on our good friend, Jamar Harp. Coach Harp, what's up, man? How you doing, brother?
Hey, cuz, how you doing? I'm welcome to be back in the world.
Oh, man. And so, for those of you who didn't know, Jamar, tell them how you got injured, man.
I'm trying to get in shape, sprinting after practice, and tore Achilles and a quad, a patella tendon. So I was at the hospital, shaking back, and I'm Still not 100% yet, but I'm out of rehab, which is good. So I'm thankful to be back in the world.
Hey, welcome back, Jamar. Good to see you, buddy.
Thanks, Sean.
Sean, I told him about trying to run with them 20-year-olds. I don't know what the hell he was out there thinking.
Hey, man, I'm telling you, dude, don't do it. Dude, running your
I
own
know
pace.
it. You get caught up sometimes, yeah.
Hey, who you telling, bro? I'm in CrossFit with 25 and 30-year-old mugs, and I'm like, nah, I'm a better athlete. I'm a better athlete than them, but I'm a lot older than them too.
That's how it starts, yeah.
It's that competitive nature. Like, listen, chump, if I was your age, you know what I would do? I could do that now.
I gotta listen to the other shoulder next time.
Don't do it. You're too damn old. Don't do it. You're too damn old. A lot of times I'm like, shut up. Get off me. Get off me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jamar, it's good to have you back and on the road to recovery. We miss you, and I'm just glad to hear that you are healing from that. So let's get right into this, bro. So I was like, oh, I know who I'm calling. I know who I'm calling. Who's gonna have thoughts on this? Let me just first ask you, what was your immediate reaction when you heard the news that Deion was leaving?
I was definitely excited for it. First, I think he accomplished his mission at HBCUs. Remember, unlike the previous guest, there was already a great talent pool there, and there was people going to the NFL every year, just not enough. So his purpose was to shine light on something that was already there and bring it back to its old prominence or glory. If you look at Jackson State in itself, his best team was probably the 1977 team that had Walter Payton, Jackie Slater, and Walter Brazile, 3 NFL Hall of Famers on one team. So Deion's team doesn't even compare to that team. Also, he's taken some other African-American coaches with him to the Power 5 level, which is always good because he can establish a coaching tree, which hopefully some young coaches like myself can be a part of one day. And just establishing a legacy going from the SWAC and HBCUs to BCS, regardless of who you are, shines light on where you came from. And it lets them know, if you looked at how he talked to the players in his press conference at Colorado, he was letting them know that the Jackson State team works harder than them, even though they're FCS team. So I think it's good. Robert Brazile, thank you, Sean. That takes it full circle, and that he's taken what he did there and instilling it in a Pac-12 school. So I think it's all great signs.
Good. I'm glad to hear that because, we want a lot of different voices on this topic because, Jamar, this has become such a emotional topic for people in our community. And I get it. Some people feel as though Deion Sanders pimped the culture, however, that he came in, he sold one thing, and that he didn't follow through on it. Yes, he did bring some things, but they wanted more of a commitment to it. I don't know if that's more of an emotional reaction. Personally, I do agree with some of that sentiment, though. I must say, though, I was disappointed to hear he was leaving because I wanted him to do more. But I also understand that he has a right to get paid. And more importantly, his assistant coaches also have a right to get paid and, for their skill set. But let me just ask you this. Do you think he used the culture in a way that was disrespectful to it in the way that it ended?
I think he used religion more in that sense versus the culture. Remember, his initial statements were that God told him to go to Jackson State and to be an agent of change. So I think he used religion because he invoked some of those same references at Colorado, stating that, God didn't call him where to do. So God is basically telling him where to coach football. in regards to the culture, I think he provided more to the culture. If you look at your last guest and some of the sentiments that she was stating, some which were due to being unknowledgeable about the subject matter in regards to her, for example, the last statements about kickers and punters and stuff. Again, when you reference Bowie State, which is a CIAA or Division II school versus the MEAC or SWAC, you're going to find that disparity. Also, referencing Howard several times. My first coaching job was at Howard when I graduated from Grambling in 2006 with my master's. And they had a safety that was leaving named Antoine Bethea that played over 10 years in the NFL. So from him, and then there was a tight end at Morgan State named Vasante Shenko that played maybe 8 years for the Minnesota Vikings. So this is pre-Dion, and we're still people going to the NFL. So there was more going now because he shined a greater light on it and just brought more exposure to the youth who, again, that these predominantly white institutions realize control the market. So instead of trying to be in this format where you're trying to say, well, how do we prop up education or the band? Again, just referencing the comments of the last caller, the bands are the most underfunded at HBCUs. If you look at shows, they pay their own way sometimes, eat sandwiches, change in restrooms. Now, some of the upper level schools, their band is taken care of, but most times they're not. The reason, and then another statement I'd like to dispel is in regards to the audience, in regards to coming in and watching the game. A lot of majority audience, and you probably know this, at historically black colleges and universities, there's a lot of women that attend the football games versus predominantly white institutions. So we can get control of that market and get them to stay more and watch the football game instead of going in and out. And there's some men that come in and just watch the band too, but if we get everyone to come in and sit in and watch the game, it would be better. Versus just making the statements like that, kind of understanding the why. And then lastly, in regards to the education, being entrenched in not only historically black college football, but just collegiate football in general. 2 + 2 is 4 everywhere you go. If you look at the predominantly white institutions, the reason they grew was not because they boosted or promoted education, is they pushed athletics, and particularly after the television era came into place. There were studies that were done after Michael Vick left Virginia Tech. Their enrollment went up over 25% just due to his playing in the national championship game. So those schools have realized that to boost their enrollment and endowment, you have to put money in athletics. So it's just that being at an HBCU with that quote unquote second class mentality, which I don't understand. When education was invented by Africans, like how can the education at the HBCU be less than a predominantly white institution just because the colors are different? Even when you look at the stats in regards to who came out, the inventors and things like that, places like Tuskegee University and so many other HBCUs put out the great thinkers of the early 1900s. So it's hard for me to say that the education is better at predominantly white institutions. So those are just some myths that are prevailing about historically black colleges. Now, there is some stuff that needs to be cleaned up, but if we get past the myths, then we can get this enrollment to increase and get schools like Chicago State be up and funding, start football, getting the MEAC, and get a real, feel in regards to what things used to be before integration.
Jamar, let me ask you this though, because some of these schools have had funding, and again, we'll go back to Howard, because Howard does have $750 million confirmed in their endowment fund. And the truth of the matter is, their athletic programs, you would think they would be really producing more. How can I say it? Producing more on the field in their major sports, and it just hasn't happened yet. Is some of this administrations at these schools, in terms of where they place the money, should they be placing more money in marketing, for instance, to advertise their programs and bring in more people? Should those who have the money be trying to get some of the better coaches that may be available? Being down there at Grambling State and being at Livingstone prior, how do you see the administration's roles in these HBCUs as it relates to athletics?
That's a great question. So basically, you have to look at each HBCU as independent business entity, regardless if they're public or private, and what that institution wants to do with its regents, boards of directors, presidents, etc. So, for example, at Howard, the push is on academics. They want to be a Ivy League school. The focus isn't on athletics. If you go into a school of business, you'll see a ticker like the NASDAQ ticker in Times Square, and different things they have for that, and enhancing their MBA, their business program, and other academic programs. There's a hospital on campus. You could be a doctor by going to Howard. So
yes, you
they
can.
push things more prominently than athletics. And that differs from school to school you go to. So, for example, Livingstone College was a Division II school. It was a religious-based school. And being in the CIAA, their focus primarily was basketball first, then football second. If you look at their basketball history and in regards to that CIAA tournament, which is what a rival to the Big Ten basketball tournament in regards to exposure, monetary impact, etc., the basketball team is more prominent than the football team. In other schools, that flip. The football team is more prominent. So it's basically where you want to decide you want to put your money at and what you want to support. It can be football, basketball, or academics.
Agreed. And so, Jamar, my theory is, and this is my personal theory, and I've stated it before, I'll say it again, I want you to get a response to. I would prefer us to, if you're going to really go athletics, I do think men's basketball should be the first priority because, again, as I said, you don't need as many athletes to become really good at that. If you can get 2 blue chippers, you've now elevated your program to a certain level. Whereas even though you coaching football, I know that's your first love, 2 players ain't gonna do it for you because you need a full squad. Would you agree with that philosophy that if you're going to focus on these athletics at these HBCUs, that perhaps maybe the best priority, the best philosophy is to focus on the men's basketball programs first, grow that, and then let that feed into your other athletic programs?
Definitely, especially again, I'm just using the recent success and facts to support my argument. If you look at the New York Knicks, Paul O'Quinn, who had a great run out of Norfolk State. If you look at the Compton State teams of the 2000s that constantly made the Sweet 16, Hampton made it one time. You got the great Lavelle Moton at my undergraduate alma mater, North Carolina Central University, who worked hand in hand with Coach Krzyzewski before he retired. So there is an opportunity to do that. However, again, you got to get everyone on board, just like with the previous guest, you talked about lack of funds or misappropriation of funds. At these state schools, you also have state appointed employees as well. So sometimes you can be in a situation where your institution is like the movie Major League per se. Where the leadership doesn't want you to win. So it depends on what situation you're in, how to navigate that. But yes, basketball and football, I think you can do both simultaneously because, again, like you said, you can have 3 stars in basketball on a court at one time, about 12 scholarships, and then get things done. So I definitely agree with that. I would just like to add football as well, too, but just because the television money with football is so big, and then with the change of conferences, you got to remember in basketball, everyone's Division I. Football has a FBS and FCS. So there's a disparity. The FCS schools play FBS basketball. So we can get those FCS football schools to get more monetary gain and notoriety. It definitely will help the basketball team as well.
And just so everyone knows what we're talking about, when we're talking about the money generating sports in the NCAA, we can talk about pretty much the big 5 are college football, men's basketball, baseball, track and field is up there, which actually surprised me, but it's considered a money generating sport. And I'm missing the 4th one. I'm not sure what the 4th one is. It may be women's volleyball, which is also creeping up, I should say. I've been watching that one as well. Sean has something here that he's going to post, and I'll read it here based off you sent me. Sean, can you tell me where we got this from? I want to be able to give the attribution the correct way before I read it. I don't want anybody saying, hey, man, that was my stuff Jason was reading.
Yeah, I'll have to find exactly where who posted it. I don't remember the place.
Okay, I'll let you check on that for a couple minutes, just because I want to make sure I do the attribution.
Okay.
All right. So I'll just keep going with Jamar here. Jamar, you're down at Grambling State. Grambling is a state university with Louisiana, down there in Louisiana. what is it like with Grambling right now? I know they had been in the news in years back, fighting for the same thing, to be properly funded by the state of Louisiana. How is that situation going?
Well, I think you're referring to the situation where there was a boycott, and it was actually against Jackson State in regards to some mold in the locker room and a weight room facility. All that's been fixed years ago.
Okay.
Right now, we're in a point where we're trying to build and be on the same plane as such as Southeastern Louisiana. Schools like that are also FCS opponents. There's a lot of competition for athletes in the state of Louisiana. Outside of LSU and Louisiana Lafayette and Tulane. You also have Southeastern Louisiana, Northwestern State, a few other schools, Nickel State. These are all schools that operate on the same level, so it's tough to get athletes. So Coach Jackson and his staff, we just been trying to go hard and trying to emulate what others on the FCS level have done, including Jackson State, and hitting this transfer portal hard along with key freshmen to do better and vie for a conference championship in the 2023 year. So in regards to the funding, yes, we're not funded in Southern University. I forgot them too.
Yeah, I'm like, I know you don't want to talk about your rival.
Yeah. But so all of us are fighting for the same level of funding as the larger school. Oftentimes, depending on what state you're in, sometimes they put restrictions, which to me are akin to voting restrictions that were on African Americans in the past. For example, certain states may say, well, you can't get these funds until your enrollment reaches a certain level. However, the school's infrastructure may not let it reach that. And then it may set another hurdle if you do increase enrollment. So those are things I've saw in the past that help these states misappropriate funds from historically Black universities. Remember, if the funds were even and Jackson State had the same funds or Grambling had similar facilities to LSU, it'd be hard for these players to choose, because before LSU, the team with the most NFL Hall of Famers in the state of Louisiana is Grambling State University, not LSU or any other school. So remember, if we took it back to before integration, the SWAC was the SEC. So getting these facilities up to par will kind of make it back to that competitive state.
Well, and another thing about that, Jamar, that, I find interesting, especially down there in Grambling, it's not just Southern. In terms of HBCUs, you also got Dillard. Dillard is down there. We've also got Xavier. You got
Xavier, New Orleans.
Xavier, New Orleans, yeah. So, I mean, it's a lot of you all right together, and you're kind of going after the same student population. So, I want to bring this up. We are attributing this to Anthony Jackson Jr., on Facebook, but he posted something. I'm going to read it. Sean's going to put it up, and then I'll read it here, and I wanted to get you to respond to it. Prior to Coach Prime, if it rained, he's talking about at Jackson State, they couldn't even practice. He got them 2 practice fields, a new locker room, a new football facility, a new training facility, ushered in a 10-year TV rights deal with HBCU that will go for all of the HBCUs, $30 million in direct economic impact to the city of Jackson last year. And that number hasn't come out for this year just yet. He also brought awareness to issues within the city of Jackson while directly calling out the governor and mayors, thing he's not paid to do. And he's definitely talking about the water crisis that took place down there. It's still going on in Jackson, Mississippi.
He actually called one weekend, I think this was before or after we played him, for no violence or no shooting that weekend, and the city obliged.
Okay. It says he's also gotten them out of terrible business deals, shown them how to conduct business and think and produce on a larger scale. The SWAC commissioner himself said how much Dion has influenced and provided for the SWAC as a whole. He said that none of us, we've seen him use his resources to provide for other HBCUs who were going without. He brought on an entire new culture within the culture, millions of eyes to HBCUs, a record number of enrollment across all HBCUs since the time he's arrived. What more do we actually want him to do? Now it's our turn to put in the work and keep the eyes, keep the advancement, keep the momentum. If that momentum dies, that's our fault, not his. Just wanted to get your response to that. I have my own personal comments to what Brother Anthony Jackson said.
Well, definitely, I agree with that. He also did a little more. He did an HBCU combine at Jackson State for HBCU players. He had different players from the state of Mississippi come, like from Alcorn State and Mississippi Valley. Along with himself, Coach Hugh Jackson, Coach Eddie George, who's in the OVC, have all helped in regards to bringing this light. In regards to that statement right there, I do think the last sentiments were correct, that now it's time to keep that ball moving. And again, I'm still continue to talk to these athletes and let them know that there is a space for them here. They can go to the NFL from the SWAC. It's been done in the past, and to make them feel comfortable by continuing to fight to upgrade these facilities, to be on par with the Power 5 level. Like I said, I do agree with that.
Yeah, and I agree with just about everything that Anthony said in his post as well. And again, I think this was such a knee-jerk reaction by so many people. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe he's leaving. Some people were calling Deion a sellout. I'm like, y'all stop that nonsense with the name calling. You know, the man did what he could do based off of the resources he had, but at the same time, he has a right to live his life, and he's also responsible for the people who are up under him. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. So he's going to take a number of his assistants with him. We know Deion was making just over $300,000 a year, which was pennies for him. So I can't even imagine what his assistant coaches was getting paid. So he's now elevating not just himself, but all of the assistant coaches he's bringing with him. They're also going to get a huge bump in pay. Talk to me a little bit about being an assistant coach in a football program at an HBCU like Grambling, and if there's any information you can share with us about those assistant coaches at Jackson State, if you know them personally, and what these opportunities will mean for them now that they're going to Boulder with Deion.
Well, that question can be answered in twofold. So it'll be offer a great opportunity again for some African-American men to go to the Power 5 level and coach there. Then there might also be an opportunity for some men to stay and hopefully be afforded the head coaching job. The gentleman that Coach Sanders referred to, T.C. Taylor, who was a former offensive coordinator at my alma mater, North Carolina Central, under Coach Jerry Mack, during that era. If he gets the job, that'll be a great head coaching opportunity for himself. Then he can build his coaching tree as well. I remember in regards to the assistants, everything is tiered. So if your head coach is making $300, then you may have someone making around $100, maybe less, and then the lowest salary can be under $10,000. So you could be in the same room with someone and make under $10,000 and work with them every day, and they make $300,000. That's why it's important urgency for the assistants and support staff. Always try to matriculate to a higher level so they can get not only a more comfortable salary, but get the notoriety so that one day they can break off and then start their own tree or get their own position room, etc. So basically his movement is a domino effect, not only with his staff, but with other staffs. And again, not only Coach Sanders, but Coach Hugh Jackson, Coach Eddie George, Coach Willie Simmons, Coach Vincent Dancy. There's a lot of great coaches, Coach Eric Dooley. There's a lot of coaches. The first Aaron McNair, Steve McNair's older brother, Alcorn State. There's a lot of great coaches in the conference. And by shining light on the conference, not only, again, you can show blemishes as well, but you can see other great coaches that I didn't have any knowledge or privy to prior to me watching just because of Coach Prime. So now that we see this knowledge, Now we can maybe follow Coach Hugh Jackson next year and see what he's doing, or Coach Vincent Dancy, or Coach Eric Dooley, etc. And get your favorite SWAC team and say, okay, what transfers are they going to bring in from the transfer portal, and start comparing everybody, and that's how you grow collectively as a whole.
Lance has a question for you. He wanted me to ask you about how do you feel about Deion taking the better players that he had at Jackson State with him to Colorado? And I know who the first name is that you're going to mention, because he stole the recruit last year from Florida State, Travis Hunter, and now Travis is going with him along with his son. Jamar Sanders is going. What are your thoughts? Or let me rephrase Lance's question, because let's just get to the heart of it. Is he stripping Jackson State of the cupboard? Is the cupboard going to be left bare? Or is he still leaving them some talent there to work with?
So from the, I'm sure we all watched the same video. The video I saw said he's going to bring 10 to 11 guys. And they have way more guys than that. Again, this year, we were close with them at the beginning. One of our transfers, Maurice Washington, a running back from Nebraska, had a great run, about a 45 run for a touchdown. We kind of lost the game in the third or fourth quarter, but it was, close, under 10 points at halftime. So again, they have a load of talent, and those guys that he's taking with him, I think he does, because remember, they swayed away from the Power Five just to be coached by him. So they can use their one-time transfer rule and go to wherever he's at and still get that, because if it would have been, I just want to go to an HBCU, they would have picked another one in that same conference, because everyone wanted to go to Jackson State. But not only did they want to play at an HBCU, they want to be influenced by Coach Prime. So he has an obligation in my mind as a coach to take those players with him. And also he had an obligation to tell the rest of the players to stay there, because again, by telling them that, he's not only looking out for them, but he's looking out for the conference. Like, he wants the team to still be loaded. And again, these other schools in the conference are trying to fight and get to that level to gain parity. So if that whole team dismantled, remember the transfer portal is brutal. It's over 3,000 athletes in there. Only 116, FCS schools, or let's say 120 so BCS schools or FBS. So most of these athletes are not going to get picked up. So he did good as a coach by telling them to stay there, continue to grow there, and build that team up there. So I think he did good on both ends, taking the 10 or 11 he's going to take with him, and telling the rest to stay there and continue to build what they were building.
Jamar, we've seen a number of top athletes who were at PWIs come to the HBCUs. You just mentioned the ones you all have down there, Grambling. What have you been hearing from these athletes who are coming from PWIs who are then coming to HBCUs? What are they telling you is the major difference? And are they feeling more comfortable with the HBCUs, or are they saying, maybe I should have stayed in my PWI?
Well, it's a multitude of things. It's comfort, experience, and then being knowledgeable of the world with smartphones and things of that nature. I can tell you a story. When I was at Iowa years back, my title was Minority Retention Specialist. And one of the issues at Iowa was some of the black players, they would go out on dates, and their date would use their American Express card, their parents. So by the time the bill came on the 15th or 17th, they're going to research the restaurant, look at the film, see who they're dining with. Next thing you know, their daughter has an ultimatum: leave this person alone due to bigoted reasons by parents. On some instances, the daughter says no. Now it's a funny story out in the air, and athlete may end up transferring. Some of them incur different social things on campus that show that they're excluded outside of their athletic participation. And then more importantly, I think this generation is becoming more savvy in regards not only to social media, but in regards to cultural appropriation and love and pride for one's culture, or having a sense of nationalism. So if you look at the George Floyd, along with other incidents, that triggered these causes of nationalism to come out or be displayed from the inward of these students or this generation. You can see more and more people wanting to do this because a lot of them are realizing that they are making money for institutions that don't really give them comfort or need outside of their athletic participation.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, just my personal thoughts is, I have always wondered. I know had I been recruited by a college, I was not going nowhere in the South. If it wasn't a HBCU, I wasn't going. I wasn't playing for University of Mississippi. I ain't playing for LSU. I ain't playing for University of Texas. I ain't playing for none of y'all because your policies go against my community in many aspects. When I look at some of these large universities and I look at the number of Black students, Black American students, let me make it more specific because universities play games with who they consider Black. When I look at Black American student numbers at some of these universities, and then I say, okay, let me see what the athletic department look like. And I see 75% of the athletes are Black Americans. And I know that's what you counting into your student population. I like, see, that's what I'm talking about. They use us to bring money to them. But the average Joe Blow Black kid, they make it very difficult for them to either one, get in to pass the admission process, or two, the price is so damn much they can't afford it. So I've always said if I was going to play in Southern United States, it was going to be at HBCU. So I'm very happy to hear that you can relate to some of the experiences that some of the athletes have
Definitely.
had.
And there isn't another thing that the other caller or guest forgot to leave out. A lot of students that attend HBCUs rely on federal aid, i.e. loans and Pell Grants, where a lot of students at predominantly white institutions don't. So that sometimes affects their pay rate, paying back. Also, type of experience you have. If you have a large population of students that are waiting on loans, sometimes schools will hold them loans to gain interest and make money for the school. Hence, students don't get their refund checks on time. Hence, their experience is altered. Now they don't want to give back upon matriculation. There's been studies that came out, and a lot of especially at HBCUs, the most people that give back are former athletes and people in the NPHC or fraternities and sororities, because they have a different tie to the school outside of academics. So they're more prone to come back, give back, etc.
Right. And that was one of the things we talked about at length with our guests. And my philosophy is that, it takes the average everyday Black American. Okay, let's say you're a Black American. I'll just throw an example. Let's say you work for the CTA in Chicago. You're making $75,000 a year, whatever. You never went to college a day in your life. You can still give to our institutions. Like, being down there at Grambling and being at Livingstone and all the places you've been, if we can just get the average Joe, hey, y'all, we're going to all give $100 to this institution for Christmas. And let's say you get 1,000 people to give $100. How big of an impact could that make in the athletic department at these HBCUs, Jamar?
It'd be huge. And again, that's part of what these new wave of coaches that are employing social media are doing, like the Coach Hugh Jacksons, the Coach Primes, Coach Sanders, by using social media and the influence and getting people, with most people use their phones all day for YouTube or Twitter, then more of these schools should be making Twitter ads saying, hey, African Americans give $1, or things like that. You can increase. We have programs for you. Maybe start offering associate's degrees or having some degrees in trades or things like that to get more eyes on your campus, get more bodies through the door. So just doing more things innovative and using social media, I think, is a great way to do that for people that didn't attend the school. Because again, if you go to LSU or University of Illinois, you go to Champaign, there's people that support and never took one class out there.
Without a doubt. And, again, according to the 2020 census, there are 46 million Black Americans in the United States. 46 million. Come on, y'all.
So get $1 from each.
Right.
You can do different things.
This ain't hard.
Yeah, get a celebrity to adopt your program. You can do a lot of different things. Just being innovative and thinking outside the box. And I think with this new age of leadership, it's coming. Remember, if I'm a state school and my state is misappropriating funds, they may also misappropriate leadership as well.
That is an excellent point, which is why I have not given a penny to Chicago State University, by but okay, it is what it is. But, and I'm very vocal about that, and they know it. Because when they asked me, I told them why I wasn't giving it to them. So, I do think, though, like you said, there are enough institutions we can pick and choose. So this year for Christmas, every year I anonymously donate to a HBCU. My wife probably don't even know this, but I've always given, a couple $100 to an HBCU. So last year I actually did it to Jackson State since Prime was down there. This year I'm debating. I'm either going to do North Carolina A&T or Tennessee State, which is funny because you mentioned those two on the show. And a reason why, because North Carolina A&T has a really good track program, a really good men's track program. They got like Olympian type level track, and they need to be supported. And I'm also considering Tennessee State, one, because I got accepted there. I never attended there. I have a lot of friends that go there. And I also know they are in the OVC, which means they're probably going to need some more money because they're in a bigger conference. So I'm debating between those two right now, Jamar. I'll make a decision. But I just encourage everyone from our community, just pick a school, man. It can be Fisk. It can be Clark. It could be Coppin State. It can be Grambling. I don't care. But we have to start giving to our institutions and not just taking from them, because these are where our future leaders are coming from, and they're going to come back into our community. We need to give them all the support that we can. Jamar, my final question for you as we get ready to wrap up the show, the special edition of What's Up Cuz. My final question for you is, what do you think is going to be the reaction of the Deion going to Colorado a year from now? Because a lot of people are saying his shtick at Jackson State ain't necessarily going to work at Colorado. So how do you see this story playing out a year from now or 2 years from now with Prime being in Boulder?
Well, I see it growing. For example, this past weekend, there was a podcast called DNVR Sports, which is I guess, acronym for Denver. I'm watching that, and I'm watching their filming of when he had his family on campus. And as I'm watching the podcast, I'm seeing people from other HBCU-related podcasts now following this podcast now. Coach Prime is there. All the way from, we got a new subscriber from Mississippi, Alabama. These are SWAC people growing this predominantly, white institutions podcast. And I just see that snowball effect, continuing with enrollment increasing. They said again on that same podcast today that season tickets are almost sold out. You got to get them this week or they're going to be gone. He's already sent an email to season ticket holders saying buy your tickets now or they may be gone. New things are coming. So I see an increase. If you have 85 full scholarships, have great NIL money, and can get the best talent in the nation, I don't see why he can't bring Colorado back to its former prominence. If you remember back in the early 90s, Cordell Stewart, Eric Bieniemy, things like that.
Rashawn
Salam, they got a lot of talent.
Don't, Jason, don't mention that name.
Yeah, well, he didn't shine as much with the Bears as Sean would like. But
I think he talking about Bieniemy.
No, Rashawn Salam. He's the reason
Salam,
I didn't get to try out with the Bears.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sean.
I know he's dead and gone. Rest in peace. But still, we don't need to mention him ever.
I thought you were mad at him because he was smoking weed and wouldn't run the ball the right way.
That compounded it. That compounded that. And I'm like, I wasn't smoking weed, and I played in Chicago. I could run between the tackles, not like him. So you got me started, Jason.
I'm sorry.
Right now, dude, Rod Graves, the director of player personnel that I had the conversation with. So he's on my shit list too.
All right, sorry about that, Jamar. Go ahead.
No problem. I'm laughing too. But if you remember during that era, the Charles Johnson, era, they got a lot of people from California due to the blood and crip violence, and then black and gold was kind of neutral colors. So I think with his ties, not only in California but Texas and globally, and his name, he can recruit. Let's say the first year maybe a top 25 class, because again, these coaches are prevailing. He's going to do well there. Coach Eddie George will continue. Coach Hugh Jackson will continue to grow. I think all these coaches will continue to grow because the kids are wanting to come back home.
I agree. And I wish Deion the absolute best of luck. We talk a lot on this show about black coaches not getting opportunities at PWIs. Well, here's a black coach that now is the hottest prospect out there. He's going to get a hell of opportunity at what is now they're Pac-12, right? They're going to they're Pac-12. Everybody switch conference.
It's 13 or 20 people on staff, and 15 of them are African American.
Yeah.
So he's doing something else there too by getting people in administration so they can splinter off and grow this thing.
Yeah, I talked about it this morning on my show. It's very strategic what he did, because people are asking, well, why now? Why now? He could have waited. Well, you know what? Just think about it. He's going into the Pac-12, okay, one of the Power 5. Who are the big dogs in the Pac-12? SC and UCLA.
Who are leaving?
Yep.
They're gone.
Yep.
They're gone. So you got maybe Oregon, maybe Utah,
Washington.
Okay, so now Washington, you know what I mean? But these aren't perennial powerhouses. Not like SC and UCLA who get a lot of those kids. Now he's going into a weakened Pac-12 with his cachet that he has, and only Deion Sanders has it. And now it's going to be easier for him. So if he does well there in 4 years, he takes them to a bowl game, and God forbid they get into the college football playoffs somehow, some way. I don't give a damn if they lose in the semifinals. He'll have any job he wants. And what you talked about and what he said in his interviews before, they asked him about, the money. He's like, dude, I got money. First of all, he wouldn't give a quarter of his $75,000 of his salary if he was in need of money.
Exactly.
All right. So people say, well, he went for the money. No. You don't give $75,000 is more than most people in this country make.
True.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to give that away back to the football facility shows that he doesn't need money. But secondly, he also mentioned, they asked him why he'd go. He goes, if I get more money, he goes, what does it do for my? He goes, I don't need the money. He goes, my assistant coaches do. He goes, it's the thing for them. So just think of the fact that if he has a defensive coordinator who he brings with him, or another African American gentleman he may hire as a DC, all of a sudden they have a good two or three good seasons. Guess what happens to him? Now people are going to want him as the head coach. Okay, I know he just hired the white dude from Kent State as their new offensive coordinator. That just came across today.
Okay,
but what about these defensive coordinators or other position coaches who are elevated, and now that they're on a bigger spotlight, a bigger stage? So I think that was one of the biggest things that he, when he left, he had already told you what he was going to do. He said he wanted money for his assistants, and it puts him on a bigger stage, bigger platform, more eyes. So now they can go out, they can branch out and get other jobs, because it's easier to get a Power 5 job if you come from a Power 5 school. If you're a defensive coordinator at a Power 5 school, you're like, well, you already know how Power 5 our system works, as opposed to, okay, well, you jumped from 1AA, well, you weren't really on the staff, and a lot of other things. He's doing a phenomenal job, and it's just unfortunate that people are mad at him. Like the Smoke Fellas, they were mad. They were mad at him, and I'm like, dude, you can't be mad at him, dude. I said, this is chess. This is not checkers.
It's opportunity.
This is getting guys up there. It's like when people come down on Michael Jordan. Like when you think about all the black folks, all the African Americans he has in their front office over there, and in positions they normally don't have in the NBA. I'm like, that's progress. You know what
it reminds me of, Jamar, Sean? It reminded me when people got all up in arms when Jay-Z took over the halftime show for the NFL. And I'm like, y'all, he right there. He's sitting down at the table. He's in the room. He's trying to own a franchise is what he's trying to do. He's taking the necessary steps. I think sometimes our people get a little jaded. They may not understand that. Again, that's why I'm using the word emotion a lot, because I think we've just, we're emotionally tied to Deion and HBCUs, but he's still going to be making progress. He's still going to be creating opportunities for us, and it's up to us to take the mantle. It's up to us to take the relay and go from there at Jackson State. And,
now there's one thing that no one's talked about that's going to give him great notoriety in getting these players is this culture right now. These kids, it's like a marijuana culture. So being in Colorado, all this money that they're getting, and they have to pay the state. You got ex-Colorado athletes or alumni that's in this business. You got kids that I guess think it's cool, or they have an athletic policy that the kids aren't supposed to do that, but we know sometimes kids find ways around stuff. So he has the element of the aura of being in Colorado. That's going to help him too, not only with boosters, but helping kids, come there and want to come there and be a part of this quote unquote quasi movement that's going on.
Okay. All right. Hey, great conversation, fellas. I appreciate it. Jamar, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate your knowledge and everything. And so glad to see you are back on your feet and you are healing. And please stop running with the 20-year-olds. You just said it like smoking weed. What's wrong with you, man?
Never again. Never again. Never again. I'm just jogging.
There you go. All right, Jamar Harp, everybody. Thank you.
Great to see you, man. Great to see you, Jamar.
Yes,
all right, thank you, guys. Please check out Sports 101 coming back soon in the near future. Graham.edu. Follow Coach Hugh Jackson. We're trying to do some great things next year. And Sports Zone Chicago as well. Please go to your ROKU. Sign on to your local favorite streaming device. Sports Zone Chicago is on ROKU as well. What's up, cuz? All the great shows. Please check out this network as well.
All right. Thanks so much, Jamar. All right.
Thank you.
And so for my co-host in absentia, I got to use Sean's words from the morning show. For my co-host in absentia, Lancey Urban, who's taking care of some personal business today. I am Jason Palmer. Thank you all so much for tuning into this special episode of What's Up, Cuz. This is a conversation. It's going to be a continuing process, but we wanted to do something special tonight based off of everything. Hey, next week, I'm just going to announce it now. We got Jeff Allen and Thomas Jones, former Chicago Bears running back Thomas Jones. He's coming on next Monday night along with Jeff Allen. We're going to talk about his new show on Amazon Prime, Life After. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. Thomas Jones and Chicago Jeff Allen, Super Bowl champion Jeff Allen, who played for Kansas City. They are coming on the show next Monday night here on What's Up, Cuz. In the meantime, everybody, please continue to be safe out there. If you're in a cold place, bundle up because winter is here. See you next week, everybody. Peace.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, we will march on till victory. We will march on till victory. Let us march on till victory.